Most people fail this test. The billionaire's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the restaurant like a knife through silk. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Crystal glasses hovered in the air. Even the soft piano music drifting from the corner seemed to lose its place for a second. William Carter slid a single $5 bill beneath the edge of his dessert plate and leaned back in his chair. The gesture looked casual. It wasn't. Nothing William Carter did was casual. At 42 years old, he was one of the most powerful men in Chicago. His name sat on skyscrapers. His signature moved markets. His companies employed tens of thousands of people across the country. But tonight, in the private dining room of the Wellington Club, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Illinois, he wasn't thinking about business. He was watching a waitress. Her name was Naomi Brooks. 27 years old. Black. Quiet. Professional. The kind of person most wealthy people noticed only when their coffee arrived late. Yet something about her had caught William's attention the moment she walked to his table. Maybe it was her calmness. Maybe it was the way she looked people in the eye without trying to impress them. Or maybe it was because she seemed completely unaffected by the money and status surrounding her. William had spent months looking for someone like that. Months running little experiments. Little tests. Small moments designed to reveal character. Most people failed. Some became angry. Some became greedy. Some became desperate to prove themselves. In William's experience, everybody had a price. Everybody wanted something. And if you waited long enough, they would show you exactly what it was. Naomi approached the table carrying a tray balanced effortlessly in one hand. The lighting above her cast a warm glow across the polished wood floor. Around her, conversations buzzed with talk of investments, private jets, vacation homes, and stock valuations. Millions of dollars floated through the room, disguised as casual conversation. Naomi set down a fresh cup of coffee beside William and offered a polite smile. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" William glanced toward the $5 bill peeking from beneath his plate. "Actually," he said, folding his hands together, "there's something I'd like to ask you." Naomi nodded. Of course. Several guests at nearby tables looked over. They knew William Carter. They knew his reputation. Some had witnessed his strange tests before. Others simply enjoyed watching powerful people entertain themselves. William tapped the edge of the plate. "That tip is for you." Naomi looked down briefly. $5. Nothing more. Nothing less. She didn't reach for it. She didn't react at all. "Thank you," she said politely. William smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed he already knew how the story would end. "Tell me something," he said. "If that's all I leave you after a $2,000 dinner, what does it tell you about me?" The room grew strangely quiet. A businessman near the bar lowered his glass. A woman at the next table turned in her chair. People sensed the trap immediately. They were waiting for embarrassment, waiting for anger, waiting for Naomi Brooks to fail the same test everyone else failed. But Naomi simply looked at the $5 bill. Then she looked at William. Her expression never changed. No frustration, no fear, no attempt to flatter him. Just calm, steady calm. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are. For a moment she said nothing. Then she gently slid the bill back toward him. The movement was so small that some people almost missed it. "The amount doesn't tell me who you are," she said softly. William's smile faded. The room became still. Naomi held his gaze. "But the test does." A faint crease appeared between William's eyebrows. The first crack in his confidence. "And what does the test tell you?" he asked. Naomi's answer came without hesitation. "That you trust money more than people." Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that settles over a room before anyone realizes something important has just happened. William stared at her. For the first time that evening, he had no response. Because the woman standing in front of him had just said something no board member, no investor, no attorney, and no member of his own family had ever dared to say. And, deep down, he knew she was right. William Carter had spent years mastering negotiations worth billions of dollars. Yet somehow a single sentence from a waitress lingered in his mind longer than any merger, acquisition, or boardroom victory ever had. The private dining room slowly came back to life around him. Conversations resumed. Glasses clinked. The piano found its rhythm again. But William barely heard any of it. Naomi Brooks stood calmly beside the table, waiting with the same professionalism she had shown since the beginning of the evening. She was not defensive. She was not proud of herself. She was not trying to teach him a lesson. That was what unsettled him most. People usually wanted something from him. Attention, approval, opportunity, money. Naomi appeared to want none of those things. William studied her face for another moment before speaking. "You think I trust money more than people?" he asked. Naomi nodded slightly. "I think you trust what money can measure." The answer landed with surprising weight. A few guests nearby exchanged glances. William noticed them but ignored them. His attention remained fixed on Naomi. "And what exactly can money not measure?" he asked. Naomi smiled gently. "Character, loyalty, kindness when nobody is watching. The things that matter most usually do not fit on a balance sheet." For the first time all evening, William found himself without an immediate response. Numbers had always made sense to him. Spreadsheets made sense. Contracts made sense. Markets made sense. People were different. People disappointed you. They lied. They changed. They made promises they could not keep. Money, at least, followed rules. Or so he had always believed. Naomi excused herself politely and returned to her work. Within seconds, she was helping another table, refilling water glasses, answering questions, and carrying plates through the crowded dining room as though nothing unusual had happened. But for William, something unusual had happened. Something very unusual. He sat back in his chair and watched her from across the room. The more he observed, the stranger things became. She treated every customer exactly the same. The retired couple sharing a modest meal received the same attention as the hedge fund manager ordering a $1,000 bottle of wine. The young busboy struggling with a heavy tray received the same respect as the restaurant owner greeting important guests. No performance, no calculation, no favoritism, just quiet consistency. An hour later, most of the crowd had begun to leave. The city skyline glittered beyond the tall windows, thousands of lights stretching across the Chicago night. William remained seated. His untouched coffee had gone cold. A thought he had spent months avoiding surfaced once again. Time. Doctors called it a manageable condition. They called it something that could be monitored, something that could be treated. But William knew better. The conversations had become more serious during the past year. More tests, more appointments, more careful expressions from specialists who chose their words too carefully. The truth was simple. Time had become valuable in a way money never could. And that reality had changed everything. It was the reason he had begun testing people. It was the reason he had become obsessed with understanding character. It was the reason his attorneys kept asking whether he wanted to revise certain documents. William glanced across the restaurant one more time. Naomi was laughing softly with an elderly customer who appeared to be telling a story. There was no audience, no advantage, no reward waiting for her. Yet she listened as though the man was the most important person in the room. William felt something unfamiliar settle over him. Curiosity. Genuine curiosity. For months he had searched for someone who might prove his theories correct. Instead, he was beginning to wonder whether Naomi Brooks was proving them wrong. The Wellington Club finally closed its doors a little after midnight. The last luxury sedan disappeared into the Chicago night. Valets headed home. The piano had gone silent. The polished dining room that had sparkled with wealth and influence only hours earlier now stood quiet beneath dim golden lights. Naomi Brooks moved through the empty restaurant, collecting the final glasses and straightening the last few chairs. Her shift had lasted nearly 12 hours. Her feet ached. Her shoulders felt heavy. Yet she worked with the same care she had shown at the beginning of the evening. Across town, William Carter sat alone inside the back seat of his car. The city lights slid across the window beside him like streaks of liquid gold. Normally, he spent drives reviewing reports or answering messages. Tonight, his phone remained untouched. His thoughts kept returning to the same conversation. That you trust money more than people. The words echoed through his mind with uncomfortable clarity. He had spent decades building an empire by trusting numbers. Numbers never lied. Numbers never betrayed you. Numbers could be audited, verified, measured. People were different. At least that was the story he had told himself for years. Yet something about Naomi's certainty unsettled him. She had not spoken like someone making an accusation. She had spoken like someone stating a fact. The distinction mattered. By the time William arrived at his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, it was nearly 1 a.m. The elevator carried him upward through 47 floors of steel and glass. The doors opened onto a space most people would consider extraordinary. Floor-to-ceiling windows, imported marble, custom artwork, views stretching for miles. but the silence inside felt enormous. William loosened his tie and walked toward a framed photograph sitting alone on a shelf near the fireplace. A younger version of himself stood beside an older man with silver hair and sharp blue eyes. His father, Robert Carter, the man who had built the foundation of everything William owned. For several seconds he stared at the picture. Then he remembered the final conversation they had shared before Robert passed away 3 years earlier. It had not been about money. It had not been about business. It had not been about success. It had been about regret. Robert had looked at him and said something William had never fully understood at the time. Be careful not to spend your life measuring the wrong things. Back then the advice sounded vague, almost poetic. Now it felt disturbingly precise. Meanwhile, 15 miles away, Naomi pulled into the parking lot of a modest apartment complex on the south side of the city. Her aging sedan rattled softly as she parked. Several lights glowed in neighboring windows. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The neighborhood was far from wealthy, but it felt alive in a way many luxury buildings never did. Naomi unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside. The smell of laundry detergent and homemade soup lingered in the air. Family photographs covered one wall. School drawings decorated another. On the couch beneath a folded blanket sat her 10-year-old son, Marcus, asleep with a science book resting on his chest. Naomi smiled immediately. The exhaustion of the day softened. She gently lifted the book and noticed a note sticking out from between the pages. A report card. Straight A's. Every subject. Naomi closed her eyes briefly and whispered a quiet thank you. Not because life was easy. It was not. But because moments like this reminded her why she kept going. As she tucked Marcus into bed, neither she nor William Carter knew that the conversation inside the Wellington Club was only the beginning. Because somewhere between a billionaire searching for answers and a waitress who never expected to be noticed, a chain of events had already begun moving forward. And neither of them could stop it. 3 days later, William Carter did something he rarely did anymore. He canceled a meeting, then another, then an entire afternoon that had been scheduled weeks in advance. His executive assistant nearly dropped her tablet when she saw the changes. William was known for many things. Flexibility was not one of them. Yet as he stood inside his office overlooking downtown Chicago, none of those meetings felt important. A stack of reports sat untouched on his desk. Market projections, investment forecasts, acquisition opportunities. Normally, they would have commanded his full attention. Today they felt strangely distant. Because a question had taken their place. Was Naomi Brooks really who she appeared to be? William had learned long ago that first impressions could be deceiving. People performed. They adapted. They showed different versions of themselves depending on who was watching. Yet something about Naomi felt different. She had not known who he was when she spoke to him. She had not tried to impress him afterward. She had not contacted him, had not searched for him, had not used the encounter to create an opportunity. Days had passed. Nothing. That alone made her unusual. William picked up the phone. David, I need a favor. An hour later, David Reynolds arrived at the office. He had worked with William for nearly 15 years and handled many of the sensitive matters that never appeared in public records. He listened quietly as William explained what he wanted. David raised an eyebrow. You want me to investigate a waitress? William stared out the window. I want facts. You think she is hiding something? David asked. William paused. Actually, I think she might not be. That answer surprised even him. By the following afternoon, information began arriving. Nothing dramatic. No scandals. No shocking secrets. No hidden wealth. In fact, the deeper David looked, the less interesting Naomi seemed on paper. She rented a modest apartment. She had worked at the Wellington Club for 4 years. She volunteered twice a month at a neighborhood literacy program. She had no criminal record. No lawsuits. No social media controversies. No mysterious connections. That is it? William asked while reviewing the file. David nodded. That is pretty much it. William flipped through another page. There has to be more. There is not. David leaned back. Honestly, she is probably the most boring person I have investigated in years. But William kept reading. And slowly he noticed something remarkable. Every reference described the same person. Reliable. Respectful. Consistent. Kind. Different people. Different years. Different situations. The same words kept appearing. There were notes from former employers. Comments from coworkers. Feedback from community volunteers. One elementary school teacher had written that Naomi never missed a parent conference despite working multiple jobs. Another described her as the first person to offer help whenever someone needed it. None of those comments were extraordinary by themselves. Together, they painted a picture that money could not explain. William closed the file and sat silently. For years he had searched for exceptional people in extraordinary places. Elite universities, executive boardrooms, industry conferences. Yet the woman occupying his thoughts worked double shifts and spent weekends helping children learn to read. Later that evening, another message arrived from David. It contained a photograph taken outside a public library. Naomi sat beside Marcus at a picnic table. Books were spread between them. The boy appeared excited about something he was showing her. Naomi was smiling. Not the polite smile she wore at work. A real one. William found himself staring at the image longer than he intended. Because for the first time in months, he was not looking at someone who wanted something from the world. He was looking at someone quietly giving something back to it. And that realization made him more curious than ever. The following Saturday arrived wrapped in crisp autumn air and clear blue skies. Leaves drifted across Chicago's sidewalks like pieces of gold paper carried by the wind. Naomi Brooks finished her morning shift at the Literacy Center and walked Marcus toward a neighborhood bookstore that hosted free science workshops for children. It was one of their favorite places. The building was small. The shelves were crowded. The coffee was average. But to Marcus, it felt like a palace. Every book held a new universe. Every lesson opened another door. Naomi watched him hurry toward the entrance with excitement shining in his eyes. Moments like these mattered more than anything money could buy. Across the city, William Carter sat in the back of another car. This time he was not heading to a board meeting. He was not attending a corporate event. He was not meeting investors. Instead, he found himself following a recommendation buried inside David Reynolds's report. The Literacy Center, the bookstore, the science workshops, places that appeared repeatedly whenever Naomi's name surfaced. William still was not entirely sure why he cared. Yet curiosity continued pulling him forward. When he arrived, he remained across the street for several minutes. Through the large front windows, he could see children gathered around a demonstration table. Marcus stood near the front, completely absorbed. Naomi sat quietly in the back row. She was not checking her phone. She was not seeking attention. She was simply present, watching, encouraging, listening. William noticed something else. Most parents eventually drifted toward conversations with other adults. Naomi never took her eyes off her son for long. Every time Marcus turned around to share an idea or ask a question, she was already paying attention. It reminded William of something he had not thought about in years. Himself at 10 years old, standing beside his father during a charity event, trying to explain a science project he had spent weeks building. Robert Carter had nodded politely while reading messages on his phone. William remembered how disappointing that felt. Not cruel, not intentional, just absent. The memory landed unexpectedly hard. Inside the bookstore, the workshop ended with applause. Children collected certificates and small science kits before heading home. Marcus received one of the loudest cheers after answering several difficult questions. His face lit up. Naomi looked proud enough to burst. William found himself smiling despite everything. Then something happened he did not expect. Marcus noticed a younger boy standing alone near the exit. The child appeared upset because he had arrived too late to receive one of the science kits. Without hesitation, Marcus walked over and handed him his own. The younger boy stared in surprise. Naomi noticed. She did not rush over. She did not instruct him. She simply watched. Marcus shrugged and said something that made the other child smile. Within seconds, both boys were laughing. William felt a strange tightness in his chest. Not pain. Something deeper. Recognition. Suddenly, the photograph David had shown him made perfect sense. The report made sense. The references made sense. Character was not something Naomi performed. It was something she lived. And somehow she had passed it on to her son. As Naomi and Marcus left the bookstore, William remained inside his car. He did not approach them. He did not introduce himself. He simply watched them disappear down the sidewalk together. For years he had searched for evidence that people could not be trusted. Yet every step of this investigation was revealing the opposite. And as that realization settled over him, another thought appeared. If character could be inherited through example instead of money, then perhaps the legacy he had spent his life building was missing something far more valuable than wealth. Monday morning arrived with cold rain and low gray clouds hanging over Chicago. William Carter stood alone inside a conference room on the 52nd floor of Carter Capital Group, while a team of executives presented quarterly projections. Charts filled giant screens. Revenue forecasts stretched across tables. Growth percentages and market opportunities dominated the discussion. Normally, William would have challenged every assumption. He would have questioned every number. Today, his attention drifted elsewhere. Through the glass wall behind the presenters, he watched rain slide down the windows in long silver lines. Then his phone vibrated. A message from his physician. The reminder was brief. Test results were ready. The appointment had been moved up. William stared at the screen for several seconds before locking the phone and returning it to his pocket. Around the room, voices continued discussing billions of dollars. Yet for the first time in his career, those numbers felt smaller than they once had. That afternoon, he sat across from Dr. Alan Pierce in a quiet office overlooking Lake Michigan. The doctor spoke carefully, professionally, respectfully, but William understood every word before the conversation ended. Time remained uncertain. Treatment options existed. Progress could be monitored. Yet one fact remained impossible to ignore. Life had become finite in a way that felt impossible to postpone. When William finally stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The city looked freshly washed beneath patches of sunlight breaking through the clouds. For a long moment, he simply stood there watching people move along the sidewalks below. Some rushed to meetings. Some carried groceries. Some walked children home from school. Ordinary moments. The kind he had spent decades overlooking while chasing extraordinary achievements. That evening, he returned to his penthouse and opened a secure file on his computer. Inside were documents that few people knew existed. Trust agreements, succession plans, estate records, charitable foundations, the blueprint of everything he would leave behind. For nearly an hour, he reviewed page after page. Then he stopped. Something felt wrong. Not legally wrong. Not financially wrong. Morally wrong. The documents distributed wealth with remarkable efficiency. They protected assets, reduced taxes, preserved influence. Yet nowhere did they answer a simple question. Who would protect the values those assets were supposed to serve? William leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Unexpectedly, he remembered Marcus handing away the science kit. No hesitation. No audience. No reward. Just generosity. Then he remembered Naomi returning the $5 bill. Not because she wanted to prove anything. Because she believed something. Those moments shared a quality that could not be purchased, negotiated, or inherited. Character. The realization stayed with him late into the night. The next morning, he called David Reynolds. "I need another favor," William said. David laughed softly. "I was wondering when that would happen." "Set up a meeting." "With who?" William looked out across the city skyline. "Naomi Brooks." Silence filled the line for a moment. "Business meeting?" David asked. William considered the question. "I am not sure yet." After the call ended, William felt something unfamiliar. Not certainty. Not confidence. Hope. Because for the first time in a very long time, he was not searching for someone to fail a test. He was searching for someone who might help him understand what truly mattered before his remaining time ran out. And somewhere across the city, Naomi Brooks was finishing another shift, completely unaware that one decision made in a restaurant had quietly begun changing the course of a billionaire's future. 2 days later, Naomi Brooks received a phone call she almost ignored. The number was unfamiliar. She was finishing lunch during a short break between shifts when her phone vibrated across the kitchen table. Marcus was working on homework nearby. Naomi answered cautiously. A professional voice introduced himself as David Reynolds and explained that William Carter would like to meet with her. For several seconds, Naomi thought there had been some mistake. She remembered the conversation at the Wellington Club. She remembered the $5 bill. She remembered the strange question. But she could not imagine why one of the wealthiest men in Chicago would want another meeting. David offered a time and location. A private office downtown. Naomi politely declined. The answer surprised him. It surprised William even more when David relayed the message later that afternoon. "She said no?" William asked. "Immediately," David replied. No hesitation. William leaned back in his chair. Most people rearranged their lives for a chance to sit across from him. Some spent years trying to get 5 minutes on his calendar. Naomi had turned down the opportunity without asking what was in it for her. Instead of feeling offended, William found himself smiling. Ask her why. The answer arrived later that evening. David called again. She said she cannot afford to lose hours at work for a meeting that does not have a purpose. William stared out his office window. That is all. Not quite. David glanced at his notes. She also said that if you want to talk, you can come to where real people live instead of asking real people to come to you. Silence followed. Then William laughed. A genuine laugh. The first in weeks. 3 days later, he found himself standing outside a modest community center on the south side of Chicago. Children were arriving for an after-school reading program. Parents chatted near the entrance. Volunteers carried boxes of books through the doors. No cameras. No reporters. No executives. Just people. William stepped inside and immediately spotted Naomi helping a group of children organize donated supplies. She looked up, saw him, and seemed mildly surprised. Not impressed. Not nervous. Simply surprised. You actually came, she said. William nodded. You made a compelling argument. Naomi smiled. Most billionaires do not take instructions very well. Most people do not give them. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Naomi motioned toward a folding chair beside a table covered in children's books. You can help if you are staying. William glanced around the room. Help with what? Everything. The next hour became one of the strangest experiences of his life. He sorted books, carried boxes, stacked supplies, answered questions from curious children who had absolutely no idea who he was. One little girl handed him a marker and instructed him to make labels for reading groups. Another asked whether he knew anything about dinosaurs. By the end of the evening, William's expensive jacket was folded over a chair and his sleeves were rolled up. More importantly, he felt something he had not felt in years. Useful. Not powerful. Not important. Useful. As the final families began leaving, Naomi joined him near the doorway. So why did you really want to meet? She asked. William looked around the nearly empty room. The answer sat on the edge of his tongue, but speaking it aloud suddenly felt difficult. Because admitting the truth would require admitting something he had spent his entire life avoiding. Finally, he took a slow breath. I think I have spent years building a legacy, he said quietly. And recently I realized I might not understand what that word means. Naomi studied him carefully. Then she nodded once. That is a harder problem than most people realize. Naomi's words stayed with William long after he left the community center. A harder problem than most people realize. The sentence followed him through meetings, through phone calls, through long nights staring across the lights of Chicago from his penthouse windows. For years he had assumed legacy was simple. Build companies, create jobs, generate wealth, leave assets behind. Yet the more he examined the idea, the less certain he became. 1 week later, he sat inside a conference room with a team of attorneys reviewing estate documents that had taken years to construct. Thick binders covered the table. Charts detailed trust structures. Advisors discussed percentages, distributions, and tax strategies. Everything was precise, efficient, impressive. William listened quietly before finally raising a hand. The room fell silent. Tell me something, he said. If every dollar disappeared tomorrow, what part of this plan would still matter? No one answered immediately. Several attorneys exchanged glances. One attempted to redirect the conversation back toward financial projections. William stopped him. That was not a rhetorical question. Silence returned. And in that silence, William discovered something troubling. The people in the room knew how to protect wealth. They knew how to transfer wealth. They knew how to grow wealth. But very few seemed prepared to discuss purpose. After the meeting ended, William requested a private session with his lead attorney. The man had worked with the Carter family for more than 20 years. If anyone understood the significance of what William was considering, it was him. You want to revise everything? The attorney asked carefully. William nodded. Most of it. The attorney removed his glasses and stared at him. This is not a small adjustment. I know. Your board will have questions. They always do. Your family may object. William looked toward the city skyline beyond the window. Perhaps they should. That evening, another unexpected event occurred. William received an invitation. Not from a corporation. Not from a politician. Not from a charity gala. The invitation came from Marcus. Written in careful handwriting on a folded piece of notebook paper. Naomi had delivered it after one of their recent conversations. Marcus was participating in a school science exhibition and wanted William to attend if he was available. The simplicity of the invitation caught him off guard. There was no hidden agenda, no networking opportunity, no publicity value, just a child sharing something important. 3 days later, William found himself standing inside a crowded middle school gymnasium filled with poster boards, student projects, and proud families. The room buzzed with excitement. Parents carried cameras. Teachers guided visitors through displays. Children eagerly explained experiments that had taken weeks to prepare. Marcus spotted William near the entrance and immediately waved. His face lit up. "You came." The words were simple, yet they carried surprising weight. William smiled. "I said I would." Marcus proudly showed him a project focused on renewable energy systems. The presentation was thoughtful, detailed, and ambitious. More importantly, Marcus spoke with genuine enthusiasm. As William listened, he noticed Naomi standing several feet away. She was watching her son with the same quiet pride he had seen before. Not pushing him forward, not speaking for him, simply supporting him. In that moment, something became unmistakably clear. Legacy was not measured by what people received after you were gone. It was measured by what you inspired while you were still here. And as William watched Marcus explain his project to younger students who looked up to him, a decision that had been forming for weeks finally settled into place. The documents waiting on his desk would not survive unchanged, because the future he wanted to leave behind no longer looked anything like the one he had originally planned. 6 months later, snow drifted gently across Chicago as people gathered inside a historic auditorium overlooking the river. The mood was respectful, quiet, reflective. On stage stood a large photograph of William Carter, smiling in a way few people had ever seen during his years in business. The news of his passing had traveled across the country. Financial networks discussed his accomplishments. Business leaders praised his vision. Newspapers reviewed the empire he had built. Yet none of those conversations explained why hundreds of ordinary people had come to this memorial service. Teachers sat beside executives. Community volunteers stood beside investors. Students filled entire rows near the back. Naomi Brooks arrived holding Marcus's hand, still unsure why she had been personally invited. She had not seen William during the final weeks of his life. Their last conversation had taken place at the school science exhibition. She remembered him smiling as Marcus explained his project. She remembered him asking thoughtful questions. She remembered him looking unusually peaceful. As the ceremony continued, several speakers shared stories. Some described William's business achievements. Others spoke about charitable projects he had quietly funded. Then David Reynolds stepped onto the stage carrying a sealed envelope. The room became silent. Several months before his passing, David said, William Carter made significant changes to his estate and philanthropic plans. He asked that a portion of his final letter be read today. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. David opened the envelope and began reading. "For most of my life, I believed legacy was measured in assets. I believed success could be calculated. I believed people revealed themselves when money entered the conversation. I was wrong." The audience listened carefully. "The most important lesson of my life came from someone who had no reason to teach me. A woman who reminded me that trust cannot be purchased, character cannot be manufactured, and purpose cannot be inherited through wealth alone." Naomi lowered her eyes. She already knew where this was going. David continued, "Because of that lesson, I have established the Carter Community Futures Foundation. Its mission will focus on literacy, education, mentorship, and opportunities for children whose potential deserves to be recognized. The foundation will be guided by someone who understands those values better than I ever did." Naomi looked up as David unfolded a second page. "Naomi Brooks, if you are hearing this, you have been appointed executive director of the foundation. Not because you wanted the position, not because you sought influence, but because you never did. You taught me that legacy is not what we leave to people. It is what we leave within them." A wave of surprise moved through the audience. Naomi sat completely still. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. Marcus squeezed her hand. David smiled gently and continued reading the final lines. "The night we met, I thought I was evaluating someone else's character. In truth, I was confronting my own. $5 revealed nothing about her. One sentence revealed everything about me. If this foundation succeeds, it will not be because of money. It will be because people like Naomi remind the world that dignity, kindness, and integrity still matter. That is the legacy worth protecting." The room rose to its feet. Applause echoed through the auditorium. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment. Not because of the responsibility, not because of the recognition, but because someone had seen her value long before she ever saw it herself. Outside, snow continued falling over the city. And somewhere beyond the wealth, the headlines, and the skyscrapers, William Carter's final lesson lived on. Money could build an empire, but character could build a future.